Hello, I'm Claire Smith and welcome to my channel. So today's video is going to be me reviewing 12 fragrances from the Jo Loves range. So I bought a discovery set of 12 fragrances and I'm just going to try them out in this video and tell you what I think of them. If you haven't seen me before, I'm Claire Smith. I make videos all about perfume, perfume science, perfume history, perfume psychology, and I also just do some straight perfume reviews just like this one and also fun perfume tags. So if that kind of thing interests you and you haven't already done so, then please do consider subscribing, and if you do end up enjoying this video, then please press the like button. So first, a bit about the brand Jo Loves. So Jo Loves was founded by Jo Malone, CBE, and Jo Malone had an original brand self-titled as Jo Malone. But that brand was founded much earlier in 1990. So originally Jo Malone worked as both a florist and also as a beautician, and she would make fragrant gifts, bath oils, lotions for clients as a thank you for them choosing to use her services. One of her clients liked these gifts so much that she ended up asking Jo Malone to produce 100 bottles for her. And this was when Jo Malone realised that she had something, that she had a business idea here, a business opportunity. And so she launched the Jo Malone brand in 1990. By 1994, Jo Malone had a standalone store in London, and by 1999, she'd attracted the attention of Estee Lauder, who ended up buying her brand from her. Jo Malone worked as part of the brand until 2006. Jo decided to leave her original brand because she had been diagnosed with terminal breast cancer. Despite this, and amazingly, she survived and she's still around today. And she says that as a result of her breast cancer treatment, she entirely lost her sense of smell. The only thing that she could really sense in the world of smell was a metallic smell due to her chemotherapy. So eventually her sense of smell did return, and she says that this happened when she was on holiday in the Turks and Caicos Islands and she was looking at a stingray in the water. She looked up and suddenly she said that she could smell again. She could smell the beach towels, she could smell a far off smell of food, and she could smell the sand and the water. Jo also reports that she has a form of synesthesia. So instead of smelling just smells, she smells objects. She says that when she wears a red shirt, she smells amber, for instance. And that is perhaps why she's so into fragrance. So Jo had a non-compete agreement when she left Jo Malone, the original brand, with Estee Lauder. And that meant that she couldn't form her own brand for a minimum period of 5 years. But as soon as she felt well enough, and as soon as that 5 years was up, she created Jo Loves in 2011. And that's the brand I'm going to talk about today. So Jo Loves actually has a total of 17 fragrances on the market currently, and I'm going to talk about 12 of those fragrances in this video. So Jo Loves as a brand markets all its fragrances as vegan and also as gender-free. And it says that it creates fragrances based around stories and situations, and it also markets its fragrances in different formats. So if you wanted a candle or some skincare, or perhaps even a fragrant paintbrush instead of a spray format fragrance, then you could get that from Jo Loves. So I ended up choosing this discovery set, and I bought this discovery set secondhand because on Jo Loves' website, they have a discovery set consisting of only 7 fragrances, and they actually charge you £85 to try 7 fragrances because they include a £50 voucher for a bottle. I didn't know whether I wanted to buy a bottle or not when I wanted to buy the discovery set, so I didn't want to choose that option. You can individually buy samples from their website for £10 each. So if you do want to try these and you do have the option, I would say going into store is going to save you a lot of money because the sample sets are really quite expensive because they do include that voucher, and the individual samples do seem quite pricey to me. So in the UK, a 50ml bottle retails for most fragrances for £82, and the 100ml bottle retails for £118. So the first fragrance I tried was Jo by Jo Loves, and this is said to be Jo Malone's actual signature fragrance. So this fragrance is really a celebration of grapefruit. It starts off with a really juicy, red, ripe, sweet, sugary almost grapefruit. Initially you also get some freshness from the mint, and that's also quite zingy feeling, and it really contributes to that feeling of the grapefruit. As this dries down, it becomes more bitter, a little bit more spicy, woody, and it starts to take on sort of a sporty feel almost. Feels really invigorating, but sadly the mint dies down very early on. As this dried down, it becomes less zingy, it's less bright, it's more bitter, it's warmer, it's woodier, and it just becomes even a little bit soapy towards the end on me. Very, very slightly soapy. This to me overall felt like a very fresh, out of the shower kind of fragrance. And it made me think of fragrances I might smell at a gym or on a really sharp suited business person. It felt very office appropriate and very clean. So for me, with this fragrance, the opening is the star, and I absolutely loved the grapefruit and the mint at the beginning of the fragrance. I was less interested in the dry down, but that's Jo by Jo Loves. So the next fragrance is called Pomelo, and Pomelo is based around the idea of a summer holiday. So it's meant to make you think of white sandy beaches, of icy clear blue waters, and of fresh linens in a hotel room. And this fragrance actually opens with a really soft, ethereal feeling citrus. And I can't identify the citrus, but I imagine it's pomelo from the name. I've never smelt a pomelo, so I don't really know what they smell like. But to me, it smells like a really soft, ethereal red grapefruit. There's also some woodiness and some spiciness. And really, as this starts to dry down, the pomelo dies back and the woods and spices amp up, and it's really a woody and spicy fragrance overall, but very gentle spices and just warming spices rather than spicy spices. I like this one, and I think when I was in store, this was the fragrance that stood out to me from the few that I tried, and this was really the fragrance that made me want to try this sample set, because I was thinking about a bottle of this one. But having retried the sample, I'm less taken with this one. It feels less interesting to me than it did in store. And yeah, I'm just not quite so into it, but I do really like this fragrance, and I think it's a nice, soft feeling, nuzzly fragrance almost. It makes me feel like I want to nuzzle up to someone else wearing this. I think it's just really inviting, and I love the warmth of it. So that's Pomelo. So the next fragrance is called Cobalt Patchouli and Cedar, and this fragrance was inspired by blue sky thinking and expectations. So this fragrance opens with a kind of green blue feeling. It's a little bit herbal almost, and then as it goes through the fragrance, it turns more citrusy. So there is an initial citrus as well, but really in the dry down, the citrus amps up. So the citrus is really a slightly more yellow orange kind of grapefruit rather than a red grapefruit, but it's still not overly zingy in the beginning at least. It's still quite soft. I think this fragrance, as it dries down, becomes woodier and it becomes spicier, but then in the final dry down, it becomes almost more zingy, it becomes more citrusy, it becomes sort of drier almost as well. Drier, brighter, there's more vetiver in the dry down as well. Vetiver really gives this kind of a golden dry feel. For me, I really preferred the dry down of this fragrance as opposed to the opening. The dry down seemed a little bit more interesting, a little bit more friendly and inviting. And the dry down actually reminded me a lot of Magic Energy by Charlotte Tilbury. And I think this fragrance came perhaps before Charlotte Tilbury's fragrance. But I can definitely see parallels between that fragrance and this fragrance. In the dry down of this fragrance, it's sweeter. And Magic Energy is also pretty sweet. And there are just other things that really make me think of Magic Energy about this fragrance as well. So yeah, I think if you like Magic Energy, you might like Cobalt Patchouli and Cedar. I think for me, this fragrance doesn't grab me personally, but I do find it interesting, much like Magic Energy. There's something about this that keeps me wanting to smell it, in the dry down at least. So that's Cobalt, Patchouli and Cedar. I feel like these first three fragrances have been very much based around a similar theme. So a theme of grapefruit and vetiver. And the first one was perhaps brighter, the second one was perhaps warmer, and the third one was perhaps sweeter, I think, is how I describe those three and how they differ from each other, because I know from these descriptions they probably sound quite similar. So the next fragrance is White Rose and Lemon Leaves, and I had really high hopes for this fragrance because I know a few people who have a bottle of this one. That's always a good sign. So this fragrance is meant to be a modern interpretation of something fresh and clean and elegant. So this opens with a really photorealistic pink petally rose. It really makes me think of rose petals, and it very specifically makes me think of a particular rose in my garden when I was a child. It really takes me back to a childhood memory, this fragrance. There's also the smell of lemon balm leaves. So lemon balm leaves are basically a soft lemony smell, but they definitely have a texture to them. and that texture is sort of slightly furry, and this fragrance has that kind of texture, and that texture really grows throughout the fragrance as it dries down. So initially, if you smell it in the air, it definitely smells more rosy than it does lemony. But then if you smell this closer up, it definitely smells more lemony than it does rosy. The lemon here is very much a very soft, almost slightly green, slightly floral feeling lemon. It's not like a zingy, citrus, bright, really sharp kind of lemon smell at all. It's very soft. As this fragrance begins to dry down, it definitely turns more powdery, and the pink rose petals turn into a type of white rose. So if you smell white rose by florists, you'll know exactly what I mean here. It's definitely got a powderiness to it, and the rose sort of has an almost spicy aspect to it. It smells almost like there might be sort of a touch of carnation here or something like that. What you're left with in the end is really a very powdery rose with a very slight lemony touch, but really just overall a lot of muskiness. It's definitely a powdery musk that you're left with. It doesn't ever really go soapy, but it definitely is a cleaner musk, and it's quite not a heavy, but it's definitely present. It's more of a vintage style of musky fragrance. So this fragrance immediately made me think of summer weddings outside. It made me think of wedding guests. This is the kind of fragrance that you would wear to a wedding. It's very clean, very bright, happy, and elegant. I do agree with the description there. It's elegant. So that's white rose and lemon leaves. So the next fragrance is called Number 42, The Flower Shop. So there's an interesting story behind this fragrance because Jo Malone originally worked as a florist, and she worked in a shop on Elizabeth Street at number 42. And when she set up Jo Loves, her husband gave her a gift of some keys, and the keys were actually to this original florist shop on Elizabeth Street. And that's where Jo Loves is now based. That's their flagship store. So it's kind of a cute story, isn't it? And I like that they've made a fragrance out of that story. So with the fragrance named Flower Shop, I was sort of thinking along the same lines as I would be with Replica's Flower Market. I was thinking something quite fresh, quite wet smelling, green, stemmy, but also floral. So the opening to this really wowed me. It was really kind of watery, almost slightly ozonic for a few seconds, and then it goes into a cacophony of different flowers, but the flowers are all very gentle and almost like they're wrapped in paper, like they're wet and wrapped in paper. So I can definitely smell some very soft pastel feeling purple florals, some soft yellow florals, and definitely some white florals. So after the initial blast of this fragrance, everything became much more recognisable, and I noticed that the Lily of the Valley and also the Narcissus really began to stand out. So Narcissus to me is really distinctive, and I really got that quite strongly in the opening of this fragrance. And Narcissus can smell almost golden, rich, sun-kissed almost, but also a little bit green and stemmy to me, but also a little bit polleny, but without the texture. It's got more of a smoother texture, Narcissus. And it's also slightly veering into the kind of white floral as well as yellow floral domains. Interestingly here, the Lily of the Valley does not dominate. It's not something that really comes to take over the fragrance. Lily of the Valley in some fragrances can just make it smell like soap, and it doesn't ever really do that here. The peony really begins to amp up as this dries down, and that really becomes the dominant note overall in the dry down, along with a muskiness. This is definitely not as musky as white rose and lemon leaves, nowhere near. It's not got the texture that that fragrance has got. This is much smoother, but I think this is also quite green, quite stemmy feeling. I definitely get the sort of imagery of florists wrapping flowers in paper. Later on in the dry down, I get an imagery of pink ribbons, I guess because it's quite smooth and it feels quite silky almost. I think this fragrance is very pretty. I absolutely love the opening of this fragrance, and I wish that would stay longer. I really like the first 15-20 minutes of this fragrance especially. The dry down I'm less bothered by because it basically is a musky peony in the dry down, but I think if you like musky peony fragrances, you will like this fragrance. So that's number 42, The Flower Shop. So the next fragrance is called Orange Butterflies, and this is apparently a celebration of orange blossom, but also a celebration of the south of France, inspired by the south of France. So this fragrance, I was very hesitant because it has obviously neroli, petitgrain, orange blossom. These kinds of notes sometimes can just be over-dominated by neroli. Neroli is something that I think can smell very, very sharp, and it can really be very off-putting to me. But judging by Jo Love's other fragrances, which have all been pretty soft, especially with the amount of citrus that they've had in them, I wasn't that worried by this one, and I was right not to be worried, because really the opening is very green. It smells very much more along the lines of petitgrain rather than along the lines of neroli. It definitely doesn't have really much of a sharpness at all. The neroli, if it is here, is very, very tempered. So about 6 months ago, I was lucky enough to try Orange Blossom Extract, and to me, this fragrance has that kind of smell in it. So Orange Blossom Extract smells slightly green, but still quite soft and floral, but also heady and sweet, and almost a little bit like a very dilute, kind of watery vanilla almost. I know that sounds mad, but that's what I got from it. This fragrance made me think of that, and it also made me think of a yellow orangey colour as it dried down. So it was green to begin with, and then it went into yellow and orange. In the dry down, this became more orangey and more woody. So this fragrance really felt quite simple, but I did think it was really bright, really happy feeling and really uplifting, and it really made me smile. It was something that I really wanted to wear, and I really like the woodiness in the dry down as well. And I particularly like the butterflies on the bottle for this fragrance. So that's Orange Butterflies. So the next fragrance is called Green Orange and Coriander, and this fragrance was apparently inspired by a snowy afternoon in New York, which I would never have guessed from the name. And it's actually a time when Jo says that she was with her family and she just decided to get in out of the cold. And this fragrance is meant to evoke the feeling of cashmere jumpers, of sitting by a fire, and of drinking red wine. When I looked at the name, I thought, but this is a citrus fragrance. How is it going to manage to do that? But honestly, I think it achieves it, and I'm quite amazed. So I think this opens with a bright, pretty green citrus initially, but it's quickly joined by a really soft spice, and the spice to me is cinnamon. It's a very soft, warm, sweet cinnamon. As it dries down, it begins to transition, and it begins to transition more into coriander, but coriander sometimes can smell really, really earthy. And it doesn't really smell like that here, I don't think. I think there still is quite a dryness to this fragrance, but it doesn't just make me think of a fireside. It makes me think of being near something warm. It's quite a warming fragrance overall, which I guess is what she was trying to evoke with coming in from the cold. This fragrance feels a little bit sparkly almost with the spices, and there's just a nice sweet, warm woodiness in the background, and also a nice soft orange citrus as well. The far dry down to me is really the best bit. So it's a sweet, zesty, fresh kind of citrus in the dry down. Really unusual kind of profile of this fragrance, because you wouldn't expect that to be the end of the fragrance. You do expect that to be just at the start of the fragrance. So I'm not quite sure how they've done that. So this fragrance really transitioned on me very quickly, and it was something that I initially didn't think much of, but with trying it a few more times, I got more into it and I got more interested by it. This to me felt quite Christmassy in a way, I guess because it's got that warmth to it and the spiciness to it. But it's really, really soft and gentle overall, and I don't think this is perhaps the one to choose if you want something beast mode. None of these fragrances are necessarily that beast mode. There are some that are stronger than others, but this one is definitely on the softer side, the more gentle side. So that's Green Orange and Coriander. So the next fragrance is called Mango Thai Lime, and this fragrance is inspired by Jo's travels to Thailand and the explosive flavours that she discovered there. So my first impression of this fragrance was wow. My mother-in-law makes a really delicious pulped mango and lime, and I think she puts ginger in it as well, but I don't really get the ginger so much from this. But that dessert is just amazing, and I look forward to eating that. This fragrance really makes me think of that dessert, and it really gives me the similar flavours in scent to that dessert. And I think that's why I like this one quite so much. It's just really gorgeously fresh and fruity to begin with. As this dries down, you notice more of the mint, and the mint is more like it's softer. It's more like the mint you would sort of taste in a mojito almost. What I mean by that is that the mint is secondary to other things. So it's really secondary to the warmth in a mojito, isn't it? With a mojito, you get the warmth from the alcohol. Whereas in this fragrance, you get the warmth from the other notes. It's not a cold mint, in other words. There's also an underlying floral and also green feel to this fragrance, but I can't identify what those are. And it's just very gently green, gently floral in the background. There's really a nice warm, fruity muskiness as well. In the dry down, the lime and the mango are much tamer as you might expect. And really you're left with a spicy, fresh fruitiness, but with a warm woodiness as well. In a way, the dry down makes me think of Jo's favourite note, grapefruit, but in the context of something woodier and warmer than grapefruit would normally be thought of as. It definitely does evoke grapefruit, even though grapefruit isn't listed in this fragrance. I just think it's a bit of a theme in the Jo Loves kind of repertoire of fragrances. I found this fragrance to be just tropical, fresh, singy, spicy, fruity. It just felt really interesting, and it was something that I found to be quite unique. This is not a fragrance I've smelled elsewhere, and I really enjoyed that about this fragrance. So that's Mango Thai Lime. So the next fragrance is called Shards of Cedar and Red Thyme, and it's apparently inspired by cherished moments with loved ones. So that gives absolutely nothing away, does it? So this is an aromatic, herbal and woody fragrance, and it really begins with a bergamot, but then quickly a lavender note becomes quite prominent. The herbal feel dominates this fragrance, but there's a slightly bitter, almost slightly soapy smell in this, as well as something more earthy and more woody. At points, I really felt like I'd smelt this fragrance before, and I think I've placed it as a mixture of perhaps some Radox bath soak kind of scents. This fragrance really starts out very fresh with that herbal feel, but as this dries down, it becomes slightly leathery almost, and definitely a lot warmer, but also a little bit dirty to me. And I see that cumin is listed, and to me cumin can sometimes smell a bit sweaty, and that's how this smells if I smell this fragrance close up on my skin. It smells to me like someone who has shaved but not washed and has applied some fragrance over the top of them. So you can kind of still smell that kind of sweaty smell in the background. I think that's just something that's personal to me, and it's something I only noticed when I was smelling it close up, but it just made me not want to wear this one. I do really like cumin in certain fragrances, but in this case it just wasn't for me. The next fragrance is called Smoked Plum and Leather, and I was really looking forward to trying this fragrance because I looked at the notes and I thought, yeah, those sound like they're up my street really. So I was really eager to try this one. So this fragrance is apparently inspired by Jo riding horses in Montana in the US. And it opens with something that smells almost like a brown saddle. It smells like a horse saddle, but also with a smokiness. The smokiness is really quite distinctive, and I really like the smokiness actually. It doesn't ever take over the leather fully, but I think there's a nice balance of smokiness and leather here. I think the smokiness, if you're not keen on smoke in fragrances, you're not going to like this fragrance. It is quite prominent. Really, as this dries down, I was looking out for the plum and the cognac because that's what really intrigued me about looking at the notes of this fragrance. But initially, I didn't smell them at all. And it was only on subsequent tries of this fragrance that I really began to detect the plum especially. I really do think they could change the balance of these notes in this fragrance and maybe amp them up a little bit to try and balance out the smokiness and the leather. I think this fragrance overall does turn a little bit powdery almost as it dries down, but definitely the smokiness, the leatheriness and the plum and also the booziness is left in the dry down. I really like this fragrance. I really felt like it was very long lasting, and whilst it wasn't overly loud, I didn't mind that because I think it's meant to be a more gentle type of leather and smoked plum. So yeah, smoked plum and leather. So the next fragrance is called Rose Petal 25, and this fragrance is inspired by Jo visiting gardens and also visiting grass in the south of France. So this fragrance really is rose overall. It's a very heavy feeling rose to me. It's the type of rose that you might smell in Tom Ford's Cafe Rose. It's kind of a musky, heavy rose. I think some people might consider that type of rose to be quite old-fashioned, quite vintage smelling in a way. I wouldn't say it's quite as heavy as Cafe Rose. It's definitely not as musky either as Cafe Rose. There's really not a lot to say about this one. It wouldn't surprise me if there was some peony or maybe some gardenia or something like that in this fragrance as well to give the rose a little bit of support. But really this is a musky pink red rose fragrance. Everyone's different, and I don't think this is a rose that I would personally choose, but I think if you like the rose that's in Cafe Rose, you may enjoy this one. So that's Rose Petal 25. The final fragrance in this set is called Pink Vetiver, and this one is supposed to be inspired by Jo's father. So Jo's father wore a vetiver scent, but it's also meant to be inspired by the spice markets that Jo's visited in Paris. So this opens really spicy. It's really warm on your skin actually. You can actually feel the spice as you spray it. It becomes quite hot almost on your skin, I think. I think really the dominant things for me are the pink pepper. That really is quite zingy at the beginning, along with the ginger. And there's also a kind of green feeling vetiver. So the vetiver is very, very present from the word go. There's definitely a bit of a green feeling. And I don't know whether that's the cardamom and perhaps the angelica. I think maybe it's the angelica to begin with, and then later on you get more of the cardamom. As this dries down, the cardamom and the vetiver become much more prominent, and the vetiver really gives it a dry, golden brown kind of feel to it. The dry down is basically a sparkly feeling vetiver with cardamom and some earthy feeling spices. So for me with this one, the opening was the best part of this. I really like the opening with the sparkliness and the ginger especially. I thought the opening was really zingy and really fresh feeling, and I just wanted that to stay. The dry down was less interesting to me. I also felt like this one really lacked longevity. It was sort of gone from my skin within about 2 hours, and I don't know whether I just wasn't spraying enough, maybe overspraying would help, but for me this just lacked a bit of longevity. So that's Pink Vetiver. So now my final thoughts on the Jo Loves brand. So I really was surprised by how cohesive this discovery set felt as a collection of fragrances. It felt like it did belong to one brand. They did that, I think, through using particular note structures throughout a lot of these fragrances. So, for example, there was usually a very soft feeling citrus, and I think that probably reflects Jo Malone's own tastes in fragrance. So we know that grapefruit is one of her favourite notes, and I really feel like she used that quite a lot. But also she used orange, she used lime, she used lemon. She used a lot of different citruses in these fragrances, but they were never zingy. They were never really sharp. They were always much more rounded as a citrus note, something softer. I think Jo Loves also caters to people who, in general, want fresher fragrances. If you want a gourmand or a heavy fragrance, you're not going to find it within this brand from the 12 that I've tried. Maybe the other 5 are very different fragrances, but I would suspect not. I think really the vetiver and the woodiness, the light woodiness, so vetiver or light patchouli or light cedar is also really important to a lot of these fragrances in the dry down. I do think there are stylistic similarities with earlier Jo Malone fragrances, and I think if you like the earlier Jo Malone releases, you will probably enjoy the fragrances from Jo Loves, because clearly Jo Malone was the perfumer at the early stages of Jo Malone, and she's the perfumer here with these fragrances. I'd say none of these fragrances are beasts. They are generally quieter fragrances, although some of them are longer lasting than others. I'd say Pink Vetiver was the low point in the longevity stakes for me from this set, but some of them were lasting 7-8 hours. So it really is fragrance dependent. The only fragrance that I really disliked in the set was Shards of Cedar and Red Thyme because of the cumin in the dry down. And my favourite from the set overall was hands down Mango Thai Lime, because it just felt very unusual and very different and like something I hadn't smelt before. So thank you so much for watching. If you have enjoyed this video, then please press the like button, and please also consider subscribing if you haven't done already. And please let me know what you think of Jo Loves as a brand. Have you tried any of their fragrances? Which is your favourite? Perhaps you own one from Jo Loves. Have you tried any of the other 5 fragrances that I didn't get to try in this video? I'd be really interested to hear about those. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.